All right, guys, now it's time to jump in and take a little bit of movie news.
What?
What?
Haha, time to take some movie news, you guys. And our first bit of movie news comes to us from Deadline. This is a story that I've kind of been wanting to talk about for a few days now. It's not today new, but it came out about 3 days ago. It was announced about 3 days ago. So I wanted to talk about this on Monday's show, and then news broke about something, and then I wanted to do it on Tuesday, and news broke about something, and then Wednesday, and news broke about something. So I've kind of been backlogged a little bit in terms of the Kelsey Grammer, Alec Baldwin comedy. So on ABC is a network. Kelsey Grammer and Alec Baldwin are joining forces to create a brand new kind of like buddy comedy. The whole here, let's jump into the article. The whole premise of the show is pretty simple. So the show is written by Christopher Lloyd and executive produced by a whole bunch of different people. But the project follows three men. Two of them played by Kelsey Grammer and Alec Baldwin, who were roommates in their 20s until their warring egos drove them apart. They reunite decades later for one more run at the lives they've always wanted. So this is the description that we have. We know that there's going to be a total of three roommates in this housing scenario, or maybe like for whatever reason they come back together. I think it's curious that in the description they say they reunite decades later for one more run at the lives they've always wanted. The article doesn't explain what that means. What are the lives that they've always wanted? What does that mean? I think this could be a train wreck, or this could be really, really cool. I'm a huge fan of both of these guys. As I've been saying on this show for millennia now, Frasier is my favorite sitcom. It's my favorite television show, period, of all time. Period. I love this show so much. Kelsey Grammer is such a charismatic actor. I haven't always loved him in other projects that he's done, but Frasier is perfect, in my opinion. Is it a perfect show? No, it's not a perfect show. Of course, there are some things that don't hold up in like today's culture. But they worked with what they had. They worked in the parameters of what was acceptable, what was not. But the comedy itself still holds up. It's still great comedy. And the same thing with Alec Baldwin. Now, one of the things about this particular project, side note, I'm really interested to see who they get as the third roommate. Who's that wild card going to be? Anyway, but we'll address that later. One of the things that's really super interesting to me about this, Kelsey Grammer, I'm not going to get into politics, so don't. I'm going to mention politics, but we're not going to get into politics. Kelsey Grammer is a staunch supporter of the president of the United States, Donald Trump. Alec Baldwin is a staunch advocate against the president of the United States, Donald Trump. I think it's fascinating because it's not crazy to say. I mean, this is kind of an accepted fact at this point. The United States of America is a divided country when it comes to politics. It has become knockdown, drag out over the past few years. And the presidency of Donald Trump has divided many, many people in the United States. And I think it's fascinating that two people on completely opposite sides of the political spectrum, who maybe a year ago or 2 years ago would have been like at war with each other, are coming together to create something and like put their political affiliations aside and come together to create a sitcom like this. I think this is fascinating. Now, we have no details as to what the content of the show is going to be. We have no details as to their characters or their personalities or what it is that they're going to do or their objectives or their viewpoints. But I don't think it's outside of the realm of possibility that they're going to incorporate maybe just a little bit of politics into the show. Maybe not a lot, but a little bit, and have each side fairly represented. I think this is fascinating. And if we're talking about healing the country, I think this is a wonderful, wonderful first step to do that. Andy, you've had kind of overnight to mull this over, to think about this, to think about the ramifications, and see what may become in a show like this. Like, where do you stand? What do you think the show is going to be about? And do you? Because I kind of feel like this maybe it's not revolutionary. Maybe that's too high esteemed a title to give a show like this. But in the current political state of the world that we find ourselves, is this a crazy show, or do you think this is so crazy it just might work?
I think one of the things that stood out to me about this show is, alongside what you pointed out, that these are two people who are on opposite sides of the political spectrum. Also, the fact that, Alec Baldwin has been playing Donald Trump in spoof on SNL. Also, that Christopher Lloyd is working on the show.
Yes, Christopher Lloyd. That's a whole other aspect that I totally forgot to mention. Yes. And not Christopher Lloyd, Marty, Back to the Future. It's the writer-producer, Chris Lloyd, not the actor, Christopher Lloyd.
Yeah, not the crazy, zany, Fester Adams. But yeah, his writer-producer aspect of Christopher Lloyd. And he's obviously been produced and written a lot of content on a lot of different
Primarily,
projects.
he produced and co-created Frasier. He produced and co-created Golden Girls, and he co-produced and created and co-produced, you know what I'm talking about, Modern Family.
That's Modern Family, yeah.
I mean, like, his credentials are extraordinary.
He's done so much behind the scenes, and so I'm imagining that there might be that tongue-in-cheek flair that's incorporated into this show as well. So I think if they do touch on the politics, I think it will not be heavy-handed. I think it will be very subtle, the same way they made commentary in Frasier, where it wasn't necessarily about the issues. It was still kind of a tongue-in-cheek comedy, a war of words, subtle banter, slings and arrows types of show.
Yeah.
So I think that's the direction I'm seeing this show being, a slings and arrow type of show where the two of them just like throw insults back and forth at each other.
Very much like The Odd Couple. Very, very Odd Couple-like.
Yeah, which I think would be hilarious. I think if we got a little bit of Frasier Crane coming out of Kelsey Grammer, just, and Alec Baldwin likewise, throwing these backhanded insults and comments at each other, I would be howling. I would be cracking up, especially if the two of them if the chemistry was well reflected on screen. Because, I mean, the chemistry that Kelsey Grammer and David Hyde Pierce had in Frasier was a godsend. The two of them just echoed and mimicked and mirrored each other so well. Like, you believe the two of them were siblings. So I think if Kelsey Grammer and Alec Baldwin, even though they're coming from opposite sides of the spectrum, are able to have that chemistry on screen, I think this show will be a hit. And I think they can have a lot of fun with it.
I agree. I think you hit the nail on the head in saying this show could be a hit. I mean, it represents. I mean, look at, and again, we're not going to get into the mire of politics, but if you look at who voted in this last election, the votes were pretty much split down the middle. Favor going to Joe Biden ever so slightly, but the votes were pretty split right down the middle. So if they do incorporate kind of a political aspect to the show, I think I hope, this is my hope, is that by having both Kelsey Grammer on one side and Alec Baldwin on the other, we can have both sides represented equally and fairly, and do it in a tongue-in-cheek way, as as only Christopher Lloyd can put out there. maybe not only Christopher Lloyd, but he's been doing it for so long. It's a perfect match. I think we need both voices to be equally heard and validated, and I think this is a great step in entertainment to start saying, all right, hey, look, there are so many differences that maybe we weren't aware of in our country, but now we're aware of them. So let's start reaching across the aisle. Let's start working together, and instead of pointing out our differences, what are our similarities?
Yeah, I mean that's a great sentiment, and I think even so, that's going to be a hard road to traverse. So I think I mean, obviously having that reflected in our shows and having that reflected in what we watch as well as what we listen to is a good starting point. And I think obviously how it's received will be another issue.
Yes. Oh my goodness.
So
Yes.
it depends. It could, be hilarious. It could be great. It could be brilliant. But if it's not received well just because it's not coming out at the right time, it could easily fall flat. It could be a one season wonder that ends up being like a cult classic later on.
Well, I guess we'll just have to wait and find out. The big
Yeah.
question for you guys is what do you think of a Kelsey Grammer, Alec Baldwin pairing? Do you think that this, as I trip over my words, do you think that this is the kind of show that could really work? Do you think that this is the kind of show that could polarize us even more? Or are you looking forward to it? Do you think this is kind of a fun premise? I'm interested to hear what your thoughts are. Jump on down to the comment section below and let me know what those are. Hey everybody, thanks for watching. If you like this video, click like. If you really like this video, click subscribe. And if you really, really like this video, click share. Because that is exactly what Batman from the animated series would want you to do. His name is Batman.